أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواحنا نترى بمقدمه الفداء فقد قال الله في كتابه المجيد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيل الله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص صدق الله العلي العظيم. Jesus said salawat. Ma salli ala Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of our Imam, please recite a louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so that we are granted a rank amongst the closest companions of the Imam, the Salmans, the Abu Dharrs, the Miqdads, the Fizzas. Please recite the loudest of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. We've been going over the various dimensions of a family and how those various dimensions help us achieve proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have talked about so far 3 dimensions of this family structure and how they might help us in that way. The first was the breaking of the ego, and how as soon as we enter into a family structure, the I that we have, the self-referential that we use, now encompasses more than one particular individual. It includes more than just myself. It's something more than just me. And so immediately the ego breaks. The second aspect that we mentioned was that there's an awakening of our need, of how much we have an abject and absolute need for something beyond us. That us, ourselves as an individual, cannot satisfy all those things. And this is something that becomes very much radically more apparent in this sense in when we're in a family relationship. As an individual, we might be able to fool ourselves into thinking that can take care of ourselves and that we have the satisfaction of our needs in our own hands. But when we become a part of a family, then we see that many, many things are immediately outside of our ability to control. And so we find a need to our master, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to depend on. The third aspect and dimension that we talked about was that our families are tests. They're a way for us to become tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world, in the sense that there's rights and responsibilities that become upon us, and now we have to satisfy those rights and responsibilities. And we can either make the most of that opportunity and become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the vehicle of our family, or if we misuse it and do the wrong things, then our families become a methodology for us to become further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we have to use our time wisely, use our relationships in the proper manner. We talked about a few practical things in that light of how we can be using our family and our family structures in the proper way so that we can go closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the major fundamental thing within that was this idea of always wanting ourselves and each other within a relationship to become better, to push each other to become closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That in any healthy relationship, the relationship is based on an idea of becoming better. There should not be any relationship which is healthy. It cannot be a really healthy relationship if I'm just fine being who I am and that party is fine being who they are. No, I should always want to become better. There is no idea of loving you for who I am or who you are. No, you want them to become better. There's always a push for betterment. And if that does not exist, then the relationship is doomed to fail. Now, all of that we've talked about in the context of a family. But in a real sense, our families are not bonded and bound by blood relations. The true family that we have is bound by ideals and not by our blood. It's bound by a singular idea of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's who our true family is. And so it merits this discussion on a larger scale, not just on who I have a blood relationship with, but whoever shares this ideal of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the rights and responsibilities that exist in that relationship with anyone who has that kind of ideology? We see immediately that there's many things that we can talk about. Whether if we go into, for example, the rights of a neighbor on a Muslim, we have that, for example, the right of a neighbor on a Muslim is that they never go hungry. Then there's another hadith that asks, well, what's a neighbor? Is a neighbor the one that just is right next to me? The Imam responds by saying it's 40 houses in each direction. That's what a neighbor is. How many of us even know the names of people 40 houses down? We probably don't. Why is that the case? The rights that we have on each other are great. There's an amazing amount of rights that we have on each other. When we look at it, the rights of the mu'mineen, we see how Amir al-Mu'mineen conducted himself in the very few years that he was a Khalifa. He says that at a point reaches there, he says that I can claim that nobody in this ummah is going hungry tonight. Can you imagine how astounding of a claim that is? Right? The ummah at that time stretches from like Cordoba in Spain all the way to northern Africa, Misr, Egypt, all the way into parts of Asia. And Amir al-Mu'mineen is sitting in Kufa and saying that not a single person in this ummah is going hungry tonight. It's possible. If Amir al-Mu'mineen can do that at that time with limited ability, limited technology, limited resources, then what's our excuse? Our excuse in this day and age, when it's so easy to connect with each other, so easy to find out what's happening, so easy to send supplies and goods and foods and all these things to each other. What's our excuse? If there's someone in our communities that's going hungry, it's a shame for ourselves. We should be ashamed of ourselves. There's no excuse for that. Even worst case scenario, let's say it's a lazy person, doesn't work, doesn't do anything, just sits around. It doesn't matter. They are going to be held accountable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't change their rights on me. That doesn't change their rights. I still have to help them. So we have no excuse. No excuse at all. Especially considering our standards of living, for most of us in this country, we have a relatively comfortable life. Right? We don't have much excuse to be able to say that we can't help each other. Yes, we might have to sacrifice a little bit on the standard of living that we want. But why are we preferring ourselves over someone else? Why do we think that just because I went to work and gained money, that money is more deserving for my wants than someone else's? Let's look at the concept of ownership. When we go into a store, let's say, and I buy a phone, let's say I buy an iPhone, and I give some money to the store and I receive this iPhone. When that transaction happens, does anything change about that phone? It's the same phone that it was 2 seconds ago. Nothing really changes about it. It's just a socially accepted concept that I now own this, that I have rights over this phone. But the reality of that phone didn't change. It is what it is. There's no sort of special attachment that it has to me now. That's completely different from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ownership of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ownership of us and everything that exists in this world is real. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to turn His attention away from us, we would cease to exist. That applies to every single thing that we possess in this world as well. And so my possessions are not really mine. They're Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's. And my relationship with my possessions is more akin to being a custodian than to being an owner. I've been granted rights over the things that I have in my life. But I'm not the true owner. The true owner is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why do I think that I can spend that money on my luxurious items before I go and give and support someone's needs? I don't have that right. My rights over my own possessions are granted by Allah. They're not inherent to me. I don't gain absolute right over my money. It doesn't exist. We'll be held accountable for every single thing. This is something that we have to truly understand. Truly understand. Because if we don't understand it, then we'll go into the day of judgment and we'll be held accountable for things that we didn't even know, for things that we were negligent of. And it's not an excuse. Our negligence is not an excuse. We can't plead ignorance in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The vast majority of us had the capability of being aware of our surroundings and who's in our surroundings. Our excuse is that we didn't care. That's not a proper excuse. If you look, there's a very famous hadith that's known by Risalat al-Huquq. It's the sort of a treatise of rights. Within it, it's a very beautiful, lengthy hadith. It's narrated mostly by, or many claim by, is completely narrated by Abu Hamza Thamani, where it goes over, the Imam describes the rights of different entities. First, going over the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over humanity, then the rights of our body parts, then the rights of various people over the government, then the rights of various people over each other. There's a portion where it talks about the rights of brothers in Iman over each other. It says, وَأَمَّا حَقَّ أَخِيكَ أَمَّا حَقُّ أَخِيكَ فَتَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ يَدَكَ الَّتِي تَبْسُطُهَا. The right of your brother is that you know that he is your hand which you go and use. وَظَهْرُكَ الَّتِي تَلْتَجِي إِلَيْهِ. And he is your back upon which you depend. وَعِزَّكَ الَّذِي تَعْتَمِدُ عَلَيْهِ. And he is your honor upon which you rest. That's the right of the mu'mineen over each other. And it goes lengthy. There's a lot more to say, a lot more line upon line that you could go over. But the fundamental point is that it's not treating the mu'mineen as separate entities, as disparate individuals that are busy in their own lives. No. It's treating them as one. This is something that's key and fundamental in developing a society. We're very quick and easy in using the word community to describe ourselves. But an Islamic community is one in which it's a single unit, in which the people within it don't differentiate between each other. They don't think, oh, this is my need, so I'm going to prefer myself over someone else. They don't think in those terms. They don't see each other in those terms. There's very few of us that can actually qualify to say that we're a part of an Islamic community. We have to step forward in those paths. If you look at the early Islamic history, you see there was a thing that the Prophet, peace be upon him, salawat, when he migrated to Medina, you see that there was something that he initiated between the Muhajirin and the Ansar, the ones who migrated and the ones that helped within Medina. He put this thing called an aqta akhwa, a sort of oath, a sort of a vow of brotherhood between them, where he brought one of the Muhajir and one of the Ansar, paired them together and said that you are now brothers. Now in that context, what happened immediately, because the Muhajirin left all of their wealth in Mecca, right? They didn't have any possessions with them. They came empty-handed to Medina, right? And many of them were quite well off in Mecca. They left all of that behind and came to Medina. The Prophet, what he said was that for the Ansar, they immediately have to split their wealth in half and give it to this stranger that is now their brother. Immediately. They didn't hesitate. They did it. Not only that, if you read the Aqd al-Khuwa, which is something recommended to do on Eid al-Ghadir, it's something that's a recommended act to do. It's a very beautiful act to do. If you read the Aqd itself, there's a portion in it where it says that, "Oh Allah, if you're going to put me into heaven, I'm going to stand and wait on the gates of heaven and not enter until my brother enters as well." Do we realize what that means? It means that I am willing to sacrifice everything for this person. Not just this life, but the next. I'm saying I'm banking my hereafter for this person. That's how much of a tight relationship there exists. That's something we have to develop. It's not empty words. It can't be empty words. It has to be based on truth and reality. But that means that I'm cognizant of my responsibilities and my rights as well. That if I see this brother of mine, or if that brother of mine sees me going astray, then he corrects me. Because he doesn't just see it as, oh, there's this random person falling, this random person going astray. He feels that pain as if it's his own. He feels like a part of himself is going astray. That's how much aware and ownership we have over each other. I shouldn't think to myself, oh, that's that person's life, that's my life. We live in our own personal bubbles. This is my life. Why are you intruding in it? Why are you asking me about it? No, it's not like that. I have ownership over your lives, and you have ownership over my life. Because we affect each other. We're not separate entities. Yes, not saying that we should go and peer over our neighbors' fences and investigate what's happening inside their houses. Obviously not. We shouldn't be spying on each other or doing anything like that. There's etiquettes, there's obviously akhlaq that should be observed. There's husn al-dhan that we should have towards each other. All of those things are in its own place. But I should be aware of what's happening in my brothers and sisters' lives. I shouldn't be unaware. They shouldn't need to express their need to me. I should know their need before it's expressed. Because if they have to go and ask me for something, then it's no fadila, it's no great deed that I've done to answer their hajat. Right? They've sacrificed a bit of their dignity to ask, and I've given them something. And no matter what I give, probably their dignity is worth more. It's no great deed that I've done. That's something that's an obvious thing. It should be done. It has no question for it. What's fadila, what has something that is an honor, is to be able to satisfy each other's needs before they're asked, before they're expressed. That's what we have to move towards. So what is it that stops us from doing this? What is it that stops us from building this kind of relationship with each other? And we see most of the time, it's the same thing that was the problem before. The ego, the materialistic outlook. This idea that, okay, I need to gain money and wealth and be the one in top and the one on, I need to amass great amount of wealth. The lifestyle, the Western sort of culture, Western culture has pushed on us and influenced us to try to achieve is not an Islamic wealth lifestyle. There's no such thing as amassing great amounts of wealth in Islam. Extreme amounts of wealth. We have hadith. Right? Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if you see anyone who's amassed a great amount of wealth, an extreme amount of wealth, know that he stepped over a great many of people's rights. It's not possible to amass a great amount of wealth without doing that. We don't have a concept in Islam of stockpiling wealth. Story after story of the Imams showing this, right? There's a shortage of wheat in the bazaar, in the sort of stores. The servant of Imam Sadiq goes and thinks that, okay, it's a good thing, I'll go and buy a lot of wheat. He brings it to the Imam gets extremely mad at him. He's like, but what did I do? It's a good deal. If you store it now, then prices will go up, you can make money, you can maybe even help each other later on. I was like, no, we buy based on our needs. We don't buy based on the future, thinking that we're going to stockpile and then safeguard. No, we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, I'm not saying you do everything with living day to day. I'm not saying that either. Yes, there's a wisdom behind things, a way to do things. I'm not denying that. But it's also not this idea that you amass a great amount of wealth, you build a mansion, you live like this. No. That's not an Islamic lifestyle. That's not how you can observe the rights of the mu'mineen on you. These things are serious. When we think in terms of wajibat and muharramat, these are also wajibat. These are also wajibat. We will be held accountable for them. There's a beautiful letter that Imam Rada alayhi salam writes, writes to Abdul Azim al-Husseini. Abdul Azim al-Husseini is the one who's buried in Shahr al-Ray near Tehran, who at that time he was said that if you don't have the ability to go to Karbala for a ziyarat, then do ziyarat of him. It has that sort of reward. Now, whether that was for that particular time or if it was for all times, that's a debate. But at the very least, it shows the level and the greatness of this personality. Imam Rada writes him a letter. It's a lengthy letter, I'm not going to say all of it. But he talks about it basically saying to say, send my salams to the mu'mineen, all these things. And he tells them that, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive the people who do good. The people who are generally good, He'll forgive them. Even the ones who do bad, He'll look over their sins. Except for three things. Those who do shirk, those who do bad things to the mu'mineen, and third, those who hold ill will in their hearts against them. Not even acting on it, but hold ill will against them, against the mu'mineen, in their hearts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't forgive them. He says that if they repent, then Allah will forgive them. But it says that if they don't, وَإِلَّا نُزِعَ رُوحَ الْإِيمَانِ مِنْ قَلْبِهِ وَخَرَجَ مِنْ وَلَايَتِهِ. He says that if he doesn't repent, then Allah will uproot the heart and the essence of Iman from their hearts. And He will remove him from under the umbrella of His authority. We understand if that was shirk. That's shirk, that's okay, we understand that. But the other two things? Okay, acting on and harming each other, bothering each other, okay, understand that as well. But then holding ill will, holding grudges in our hearts against the mu'mineen. So Imam is even saying that if you do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will uproot Iman from your hearts. This is the level, demonstrating the level of the relationship. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll talk about another hadith. It's a very beautiful hadith. But it's a hadith about describing the rights of the mu'mineen in a very, very beautiful way. But just as a teaser for that, before I end the speech, there's a person who goes to the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is near the time where the Shia have become under great amounts of scrutiny. And so he can't meet the Imam openly in regular time, so he has to go during Hajj time to meet the Imam. Because in the whole sort of bustle and rush of Hajj, it's easy to sort of slip by the people who are watching and you can meet the Imam. He greets the Imam, And he sees that the Imam responds, but responds in a different way that he's used to, from what he's used to. He frowns at him almost. And he asks him, what is it that I've done that has made you change? It's a very beautiful way of putting it. Right? It's a very beautiful. He knows that the Imam doesn't change out of his own whims and things like that. No, it must have been something that he did. So what is it that I've done that's made your disposition toward me change? The Imam responds by saying, تَغَيُّرُكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, because the way that you've changed with the mu'mineen. We'll go tomorrow, inshallah, on a very lengthy, the hadith has very, very, very beautiful parts about it, where it talks about how the relationship of the mu'mineen is a very, very beautiful thing and a lofty thing. One of the essence of this is this: if I want to build a relationship with my imam, if I want to be a follower of my imam, I cannot do it by ignoring the mu'mineen. It is not possible to do it if I ignore the mu'mineen. I do not qualify to being the follower of my imam if I'm ignoring the mu'mineen. Doesn't matter how much I cry for them, doesn't matter how much azadari I do, how much latmiya or sinazari, whatever it is I do, it makes no matter how many times I go for their ziyarah, it doesn't matter any of that if I'm ignoring the mu'mineen. I don't qualify to be their follower. That's something we have to understand. Now, a lot of times we try to do good things for each other, but sometimes we do them in the wrong way. I'll give a very overt example. Inshallah, maybe it'll also break the monotony as well, but then we'll apply it to a more sort of nuanced examples as well. There's a story when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is going and he's observing one of the people that he knows, and he sees him doing something kind of suspicious. It's narrated that he starts to follow him around. He says that he sees this person going to a bread seller. He sees that he secretly slips 2 pieces of bread. Right? Imam thinks to himself that, maybe he paid for it, right? Maybe, he didn't, actually steal it. Maybe he just wanted to, maybe he paid for it in advance and now he's just, taking it. Then he sees him go to a pomegranate seller. He sees him do the same thing. He slips 2 sort of fruits, pomegranates as well. He said, okay, maybe you actually bought it or something. It's like, why did he hide it though? Why did he slip it? It's obviously something wrong is going on. He follows him. Then he goes and he sees that this person goes to a poor person and gives the bread and the pomegranates to this poor person. The Imam confronts him and says that, I was watching you and I saw what you did. What is it that you're doing? The person asks him to first introduce himself because he didn't recognize who the Imam was. Eventually he introduced him. Eventually he got to the point where the Imam introduced him in vague ways, and then eventually the person realized. He said that, okay, you're Ja'far ibn Muhammad, and okay, I realize who you are. He's like, I don't understand. I thought you were, knew the Quran and stuff. And the Imam is like, what ayah of the Quran do I not know? And he says that, don't you know that whoever does a good deed, فَلَهُ عَشْرَ أَمْثَالَهَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiplies it by 10? And if he does a bad deed, then it's only that one? So don't you know math? Right? I stole 4 things, that's 4 bad, but I gave them all away. That's 40 good. 40 minus 4 is 36. So I'm in the clear, right? I'm not in the red. Imam is like, you didn't even understand the slightest bit of the Quran. Right? So Allah also says that He only accepts إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. He only accepts from the muttaqeen. You have to do the right thing. The way you do things matters as well. And so how should we be helping each other? Right? Should we be helping each other in the sense of, however I want to help? No, it's not about me. And it's actually not about the other party either, how they want to be helped either. It's about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He wants from you. What is the most fundamental and greatest help that I can do to someone, and what someone can do to me is help me in my iman. Help me stay on the straight path. Why do we immediately think that the first thing of helping, of charity, is, giving away possessions? That is good, and we should do that. Definitely do that. But ranking that's much, much lower than helping someone in their iman. Why do I think that extending someone's life in this world is inherently good? If their life is something that's the playground of shaitan, right? Like how we read in Dua Makaram al-Akhlaq, it's not something good. Helping someone in iman is what's truly, truly beneficial. The ripple effects of that we can't even understand. Not trying to denigrate charity. Charity itself is extremely important. We should definitely need to do that. But it's not the only thing. It's not the greatest thing. Now, on the topic of helping each other, I want to mention something because of the occasion of tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last Friday of Shahr Ramadan. It's something that has been known for many, many years, since 1979, as Al-Quds Day, something that was coined by Imam Khomeini. Now, I don't really care if people like Imam Khomeini, don't like him, like Iran, dislike Iran, like the revolution, don't like the revolution. That's not my point right now. It's not something I want to talk about. It's not something that I care about really to talk right now. My point is pure and simple. There is atrocities happening in Gaza, in Palestine. Atrocities by any measure of the word. And that should be something that is extremely, extremely bothersome for us. Something that will not allow us to rest easy. And tomorrow is a day that was announced as a day of support of Palestine for over 40 years. Over 40 years. And something that's grown beyond Iran, much beyond Iran. At the very least, we have it within us to be able to pray with our hearts, to say something with our words if we can. Say something for Palestine. If we have social media, I'm not the biggest proponent of social media. And if you look, I don't even have any real accounts that are anywhere on Facebook or anything. I don't have any accounts. But if you do have an account and you're someone who posts things every day about every minutiae of your life, then at the very least, tomorrow would be a day to post something about Palestine. Would we say something about the atrocities happening? Some people come back and say that, oh, what about the atrocities happening in other places of the world? What about what's happening in Afghanistan? What about what's happening in Bahrain? What about what's happening in Iraq? What about what's happening? That's true. I'm not denying that there is atrocities happening in other places. And we should care about them. And we should speak out against them. And we should do our utmost to help the mu'mineen, no matter in which place they are. But we shouldn't use that as an excuse to not talk about Palestine. What's happening now is an atrocity that we barely can even understand the amount of. There was a time, perhaps, when I would have thought, how is it that the people, the Muslim Ummah, at the time of Imam Hussein saw that atrocities were happening to the Ahlul Bayt and stayed silent? How is it possible that that happened? But now we're seeing atrocities happening to our Ummah. Our Ummah. And many of us are silent. I'm silent. What excuse do I have? What excuse am I going to give in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I going to say, oh, they're Ahl Sunnah? Is that an excuse? Look at Amir al-Mu'mineen. In the time period of the first three Khulafa, Was he just, in his house doing nothing? No. He was helping them, supporting them, fighting in the battles. To the extent that Umar says, Lola Ali lahalak al Umar. If Ali was not to be there, then Umar would have been destroyed. It shows the amount of support he gave for the cause of the Ummah. Look at Imam Zain al-Abidin in his du'as that he has in Sifat Sajadiyah. Look at du'a that he has for the people who are on the borders of the Muslim Ummah. And think, in Imam Zain al-Abidin's time, who is in charge? Yazid. Yazid's in charge. It's his army that's on the borders. And look at how much he prays for them. Look at how much the Imam prays for them. Because the cause of the Ummah is greater. The cause for the Muslimin in general is greater. We don't have an excuse. At the very least, we need to educate ourselves about what is happening. We need to be aware of what's happening. We shouldn't be negligent. Because again, it's a right that the people have on us. It's a wajib right that they have on us. And again, I'm not saying to ignore other atrocities. Other atrocities are there, they should come to light as well. That doesn't mean that we're going to start playing a game of, oh, my atrocity is worse than your atrocity, so I'm going to say this and you can't say that. No. Let's not play games like that. Let's not play games with ourselves and say, oh, Iran said Al-Quds Day, I don't like Iran. Iran did bad things to me, so I'm not going to do it. No. It's not about Iran. It's not about a particular country. It's about the cause. And no matter who you are, if you look at it with an honest eye, with an unbiased eye, you'll see that supporting the cause of Palestine has given nothing to Iran in terms of benefit. In terms of material benefit, they gain nothing from it. But at the very least, they stood by their word. At the very least, they stood by it and supported Palestine for these 40 plus years. And perhaps not a single other country can claim the same. Not a single other people can claim the same. And that's something to learn from. And I'm not saying Iran as a country, right, as its own. Iran doesn't even belong to Iranians, right? That's something that they have to get over themselves about. Right? It's very clear. Iran doesn't belong to Iranians, it belongs to the Muslims. Right? They have to get over themselves about that. Right? That's something we have to realize. Alhamdulillah, it's time for Salat. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that gives us the tawfiq to do the rights and abide by the responsibilities that He's put upon us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us among the true followers of His Imam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us one true ummah by means of which we can qualify to being the followers of the Imam. ببركة الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. آل محمد.